very pleased to be here on behalf of ASCL. Our Director of Policy, Julie, has just moved forward to heckle, I think. Really pleased to be here. I'm going to start with a sentence that I'm guessing hasn't been said in this room before, so let's test that out. When I was young, my ambition was to be Noel Edmonds. I'm guessing that's right, Nick. No one has said that. Okay. So I have personal thanks to a careers advisor for talking me out of wanting to be Radio 1's breakfast DJ, which Noel was at the time. So what I'd like to do is just to reflect on 2 or 3 things. We represent 19,000 head teachers, deputy heads, assistant heads, business leaders, the people who are responsible for the nation's future. Lots of them are secondary, lots more of them increasingly are primary. And they've lost their confidence, we think. We think they've become anxious. We think that the English education system is looked on by the rest of the world as extraordinarily successful in many respects. Its quality of leadership very successful. We don't hear that from leaders themselves because they think they're being judged by the number of GCSEs children are getting and by a curriculum which is now narrowed to become an EBAC, a set of certain qualifications. We have to do something about this. So for this reason, we're particularly interested in this work, if it's going to help to motivate children, but more important, if it's going to give children back a sense of self-esteem, that it's not just about ultimately being judged by qualifications, it's about self-worth. We're impatient with the education system at the moment. And if we take a former education secretary, Justine Greening, who was a very effective, I think, in many ways, education secretary, she talks of her time in Rotherham. She talks of hoping that one day she would be able to have a career, have a house, have a relationship, because, as she put it, I knew there was something better out there. Now, what is that saying to children in Rotherham about how you ultimately become successful? If you've read David Goodhart's book, The Road to Somewhere, you'll know that 40% of people live within 20 miles of where they lived when they were 14. They are the somewheres. They are rooted in place. And yet the people who talk, people like me and people like you, are the people who will have probably got A-levels, probably got a degree, will be global citizens who will be the anywheres. We have to do something for the somewheres to give them a sense of self-worth, because at the moment, this year, 35% of them are going to get a grade 3 or a grade 2 or a grade 1 at GCSE in the new system of GCSEs. Right? All the attention will be on the children who get the grade 7, the grade 8, the grade 9, those top grades after the change in the qualification. Frankly, we never had to worry about those children. Those children always had qualifications that opened the doors for them then to be able to go on and do A-levels. But what does it feel like, do you think, to get a grade 3? So on August the 20th, when you go in for your GCSE results, and everybody's jumping up and down, having their pictures taken in the paper because they got their 7s, their 8s and their 9s, you've got a grade 3 after 12 years of your early years teacher, your primary teachers, your secondary teachers, all of them trying to help you. And in English and maths, you have got a grade 3. And what do we say as a national narrative about the grade 3? Well, we say that the grade 4 is a standard pass. We say the grade 5 is a good pass. So what's your grade 3? Good fail? How dare we? How dare we do that? That we can't give children the dignity of the esteem of something which says in my national language I can hold up a qualification. Now, if this is going to help to motivate young people, but more important, if it's going to have human beings talking to human beings, giving a sense that there are people like you doing things that maybe you hadn't thought about, and they're still here in Rotherham, maybe that's going to open doors for that forgotten third. So we're really interested in the research here, and we'll be very keen to share it with our members. So I want to talk about 2 things really briefly. I want to talk about leadership at the moment, and then I want to come back and talk about learners and young people. So what we've got with our leaders at the moment, you remember Churchill says that if you're a school leader, you've got more power than the British Prime Minister. It doesn't feel like that to our school leaders. Too many school leaders are hugely anxious. One phoned me up or emailed me on Christmas Day to say they had a sleepless night the night before, worrying about this summer's GCSE result. We know in the east of England, a couple of years ago, on GCSE results day, 3 head teachers were called in and lost their jobs. They had started the previous September. So 9 months after starting that job, based on a set of GCSE results, those leaders were told that they were the wrong people in that place. We have to do something to lift that level of anxiety out, because we haven't got lines of people wanting to step up and become school leaders. And therefore, one of the things we need to be doing is talking about the wider responsibility to prepare young people to step into the world to take their place. Part of which will be about qualifications, part of which will be about motivation. More important than that is, what is it like in the 21st century to be a human being? What are the skills and qualities you're going to need? And what we know from employers is you're not going to get that by simply giving me a string of EBAC qualifications. It will be about how I relate to other people, how I work in teams, how I solve problems, the resilience I show when I get stuck on things. It'll be the social capital that you get not just within the classroom, but from playing in an orchestra, playing on a sports pitch, taking part in a debating society, doing Duke of Edinburgh award scheme. And of course the middle classes know this. The middle classes, like me, largely spend their weekends driving their children from gymkhanas to football matches to orchestras. And it's not because we think our child is going to end up being the best international horse rider. It's because essentially we're mixing children with similar kinds of children. We have to turn our attention to those children at the moment who are feeling unmotivated, demotivated, let down by an education system that seems to give the attention to the anywheres and not the somewheres. So partly what we want to do is to say to leaders, what's your legacy going to be? When you step out of headship, what do you want to be remembered for? I was a head for 15 years, and when I finished, no one gave me a card saying, well done for the way you ran the performance management system. So what you ultimately want to do is to think that through the team of adults we've got here, those adults are going to help those young people in a complicated world to know how they navigate their way through, whether it's how we deal with social media, whether it's how we deal with problems and crises, whether it's how we show we disagree with somebody else. That is what the human being will always be able to do that the robot won't. So let's let the robots do the boring stuff and let the humans have the interactions. And the great thing about this research here is it reminds us that children hearing adults talking about things, opening their minds to things, whilst it's always happened in the classroom in subjects, it's being squeezed out of too many schools at the moment because of the accountability that seems to say the only things that matter are those qualifications. And at its very worst, that is having a terrible and damaging effect. So a newly qualified teacher I spoke to, an English teacher, I was an English teacher for 32 years. I said, what are you teaching? He said, well, with year 7, so they're the 11-year-olds, I'm teaching an Inspector Calls, J.B. Priestley. I said, blimey, I thought it was a GCSE text. He says, it is, yeah. We teach it every year. We teach it every year, so that it's in their bloodstream by year 11. Now that's a failure of leadership. That is us being so anxious that we are doing inappropriate things for young people and squeezing the passion out of what ought to be one of the greatest subjects on the curriculum. So you can see how this is going to help us to make the case, just as Ofsted is helping us to make the case, that the curriculum is not the same as qualifications. The curriculum is not the same as a set of EBAC qualifications, the histories, the maths and so on, important as they are. Your curriculum is what are the skills and the knowledge that you think the next generation are going to need. And it might be that in Rotherham that's going to be different from what they will need to know in Exeter. That you should have the power, as Churchill said, to decide what's the appropriate curriculum for you in your context. And Ofsted should be bold enough to hold a mirror up and say, we're looking at your intent, we're looking at how you implemented that, we're looking at the impact. You have made the decisions in the interest of the children, not in the interest of league tables. So I think this is part of an important narrative to help us to reclaim a sense of what are we doing to help to prepare young people. So let me talk about those young people a little bit more. So we talk about the forgotten third. They're the children who last year got a grade 3, a grade 2, a grade 1. The problem is, and this isn't to rain on anyone's parade today, the problem is it'll be the same statistics this coming year. It was the same statistics the previous year. The system is built around that. There's something called comparable outcomes, which basically looks at how children do in their Key Stage 2 test, that's the end of primary, and it then extrapolates that. So you essentially are showing that the same proportion of children are doing well. So in order for you to get a 4, I have to get a 3. There will have to be a forgotten third unless we do something about it. And we are. We have to. We have to give children the dignity of something. We'll come back to that another time because we have to do something about it. When we spoke to children who had got their grade 3 and then went into FE college in a country that constantly talks about how important technical education is, but essentially doesn't show that it's important, doesn't invest in technical education. FE colleges have seen a catastrophic decline in their funding, right? And increases in class sizes and so on. So whilst we talk about technical education, we then send those children who've got their grade 3 to go and do their course, whatever it might be. It might be leisure and tourism, it might be hairdressing, whatever it is. If they've got a grade 3 in English, they have to do a resit. They have to. It's mandatory, right? Now, if you saw last year's GCSE English paper from AQA, you will know that those grade 3s, like the grade 4s and the grade 5s, will all ask questions about the narrative voice in a Dostoevsky novel. It's not even English literature. And then you're training to be a hairdresser, and you are being put through the indignity of having to resit something. And if you fail it, you resit it. If you fail it, you resit it. 6 times some of those kids are resitting that. How dare we do that? So anything that builds their motivation, their self-confidence, of course is going to be important, but this must empower us also to question a system that, unlike the Shanghais, the Finlands, the Denmarks of this world, appears to start from saying the collateral damage is 35% of children in order to show that the other 65% have got a pass. And when we spoke to one of those children in the FE college who got a grade 3, he was doing his resits, he said, I am not thick. That grade doesn't represent who I am. So at a time when so much that we hear about careers is about metrics, it's about systems and so on, what we like about what you're doing here is it's about human beings, it's about people standing and talking, you thinking about people maybe from your area who are now doing things you've never thought about, explaining it to you. And that sense of human interaction is so important. So we welcome this because of what it can do in terms of helping children with their qualifications. We like it more because of what it appears to do in terms of helping them with their motivation. But we like it particularly because what it's going to do to help them with a feeling of self-worth. Thanks for inviting me today.